Hey, party people. I am excited to announce the beginning of a new series on my channel called How Do You Make That? In this series, you are going to send me pictures of garments, and I am going to show on video how you would make that. Am I actually making the patterns and sewing it? No, but I'm going to break down the development and construction process, what I would do if I were to attempt making the garment, and kind of pick it apart and talk about it. If you want to send me a garment for consideration, you need to send me clear, high-res photos of like really clean photos that show off the garments. Okay, like don't send me pictures of a skirt that's like lifted up in the breeze and like kicked up over her face where I don't really understand the construction. Something simple like a runway walk where you can kind of, it just is walking down the runway is a good kind of photograph. If you want to send me a video, do not send me a video. Do not send me huge files. Send me a link to a video. Okay. If you want to show me like, oh, can you look at the pants on minute 203 of this video? Okay. The more specific, the more clear, the best images, those are the ones that are going to get featured and discussed and have the construction all broken down for you. And you need to email all of that to teaching@zoehong.com. And in the subject line, write, how do you make that video? Since I'm only just announcing it today and I don't have any submissions, I'm going to kick this off with some of my designs. When I was working on the Patreon fashion design class, which is complete, which you can still take, by the way, patreon.com/ZoeHong, I did a whole design project alongside the students to demonstrate what I wanted from each lesson. And so I'm going to share with you today the sketches that I made for my Patreon fashion design project and break down for you how I would make every single one of these garments. This was my favorite one. It is a giant sweatshirt. And in the Patreon series, I actually did a full tech pack for this dress. Basically, the concept for that collection was easy to wear, evening wear for the 35 plus, something super fun. But, definitely don't take yourself too seriously. But nothing like super corseted, flying, buttressed, something, like nothing super like difficult to wear. This is literally a sweatshirt. Honestly, if I were to make it, I would actually buy a sweatshirt that I like the fit of and then knock off the pattern and start with this. Last week I did my AI's impact on fashion design, and I was talking about knockoffs. And someone raised a good point that I forgot to mention is that a lot of pattern makers and designers do knock off clothes, but purely for the silhouette and not to knock off the design. And that is true. And it is indeed an efficient way to go about product development. Like, let's say you want to do a trench coat and you want to just knock off a trench coat that you think is nice. You would have your pattern maker knock off the trench coat pattern, and then you would then start thinking about your own fabrications, your colors, all the special details that you would change to make it yours. But trench coats in essence, they're all a certain degree of similar to each other. That's what makes them all trench coats. And so that is an efficient way to develop a pattern. And so something like this, I would buy a sweatshirt if I could that I liked the drape and the length and everything. And then I would start separating out these style lines. But this whole thing was discussed in my Patreon class. I promised my Patreon students that I would not post any Patreon content for free. So we're just going to roll that up Just as a side note, something I like to do with all of my designs is to figure out colorways by, doing my first pattern flat and then scanning it in, which you would need to do in order to do the Illustrator version of this flat. And then just, you could do it with marker, you could do it in Photoshop and bloop, bloop, bloop in some colors. You will have already figured out your color story from before, and established your fabrics and your colors from before. And you can just plop, plop, plop the colors that you had previously chosen. I did a black version, a baby teal version, baby mint green, mint blue version, glacier blue. Oh, I should have called it glacier blue, Alaska vibes. Okay. And a white and gold version. So something to think about in your development moving forward. Okay. Let's start with these shirt dresses that I really love. Again, this was all part of that same project. One of my main kind of sources of inspiration was kintsugi, which is when the whole Japanese ceramics, when they're broken apart and you put it back together again with gold. And so that's when I found that, this gold leather that was really perfect for it. I started thinking about splitting apart designs with, kind of organic style lines and then inserting gold. And these two shirt dresses were kind of part of that. And something like this, okay, what I would end up doing is, of course, I would make a shirt, or I would buy a shirt, something that fit really well. And honestly, what I would do is take a shirt. If it didn't fit me, the fit model as perfectly as I would want it, I would actually knock off the shirt, retailor the shirt the way I wanted it, and start there. And then when the shirt is on the model, you use twill tape. Okay, 1 second. There's two kinds of twill tape. This is fabric twill tape, and you put this on your dress form to mark style lines, measurement lines on your dress form with pins. This is fabric. This is a different kind of twill tape, and it's literally tape, plasticky tape, and they come skinnier than this also. But basically, when you have a muslin or a first toile, maybe it's in the same fabric as your final, you literally just put this tape onto the fabric while it's on the fit model or the dress form to test out style lines, or to test out, like, what if we move the hem here? What if we move the waist here? What if we put our darts here? And you just mark the tape directly on the toile, so you can visualize any style line changes you want to make. So something where it's not about pinning things out, pulling half an inch out of the waist, but really about the visual appearance. Maybe you want to do something like a shirt that you want to do some sort of Mondrian color blocking. Then you would lay the tape to kind of mark it all off. And then you would take the taped up shirt, give it to your pattern maker and say, separate them out like this. So something like this, you would take a twill tape like this and mark this line and this line across the whole shirt. Okay. This never made it to the final cut, so I don't have a back to it. But you would do it to the back as well before it gets separated out. And then you would figure out what this fabric is and this fabric, okay? Something like this, I would do like a beautiful crisp cotton shirting, like a really luxurious one, would be great. You can also do something that is like a very lightweight silk crepe, something that's a little bit crisper. It's got tape on the back, but it's got a little bit of texture, okay? But it's matte, and it's got a nice drape to it. And these are charmeuses, and they are glossy in finish, but similar in weight to the crepe. Not heavy charmeuse, just regular charmeuse. And if you wanted the glossy, satiny look to your shirt, like we've all seen like silk satin shirts before, something like that, you could go with something like that instead. And then we have this pleated piece underneath. And I mean, I think a real cheapskate version of adding this is to create a row of pleating and just top stitch it to the edge, all along. You could do that. If you wanted something that looked and felt a little bit more substantial, something you could do is to create a whole inside lining piece that's tacked on. And so you would have tacked on to the shoulders, this inner sort of dress panel. And it would end a few inches above the shirt hem, and it would have the pleated panel attached to that. And it's a loose lining, so it's kind of falling loosely inside, not only kind of attached at the top shoulders. And that's the underneath piece. And then, because for this, I would want this to be a working button placket up to here. And then I would keep this part all closed. This should be, because of the boxy shape of the whole dress, this should be sufficient for most people to get into the dress, assuming that they're getting the correct size for their bodies, right? And so in the front, the lining would be tacked onto separate pieces in the front. It wouldn't be all one panel in the front, so that you could open the placket. And you could, I want the buttons to be inside. I don't want them to show, but you could leave it open. The shirt sleeves would be done like normal short shirt sleeves, etc., etc. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I just want to send these off to a pattern maker, because I would wear these. If I had an event, I would so wear the hell out of these. But this is also long enough where you could open this whole button closure with hidden buttons and slide in. And this could be closed, or maybe this whole section is closed, but maybe down here it's open, like a shirt dress would be, so that you can walk easily. Or you could keep all this closed and do a side slit. Okay, wrists hit right about crotch level. Okay, if you watch any of my figure drawing videos, you know how much I emphasize this. Go ahead and stand in front of a mirror and let your wrists hit your hips, and your wrists will be right around crotch level. Okay, human variation, of course, but your wrists will hit right around. And if you don't have a lot of flesh in your hips, you could probably feel your hip bones sticking out and hit somewhere near your wrists. Those hip bones are actually part of your femur, but do not get me started. I will talk about anatomy all day. Okay. So, your crotch level is about here. That's how you know this is going to be a full sleeve. That's about crotch level. And so this is about mid thigh. So maybe I want my slits to go mid thigh. I could keep this whole thing closed up from here to here, and then just have side slits for walking ease. Or you could do a back slit. And then again, I would do the same thing where I would take the same shirt. I would want it to fit the same exact way, because fit consistency across a brand is really important for customers repeating shopping experiences. They want to come back once they get to know a brand, and they like the fit and the size and all these things when they get used to it, especially if it's a customer who likes to shop online a lot. Or even not that, but they just like to make things fast. They don't like trying every little thing on, But, they would carve out this. And I made these lines similar. It's something that kind of wove through my entire collection, were these very similar kind of organic crack lines. Okay, the ceramics cracking, not drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. Okay, and so this is a panel. This is a panel, and again, mark it off with a twill tape. This is a flounce, and it is not the same as these pleats that are folded all the way the same, so that each pleat is the same width at the top as it is the bottom, just folded like that. But a flounce is when you cut it into a circle, and then you cut the inside of the circle, and then you cut that, and then you spread it out. And because this is the measurement of this, right? And you have so much more measurement along the outside. And that's how it ruffles and flares as you sew this into this seam. And so you get all this ruffling happening front and back. Okay. And then I have 2 layers because I have this organza. Okay. Development is nothing if you're not thinking about your fabrics. I have this beautiful organza. It's pink. It's very pretty. It's very stiff, but you do want a couple of colors, a couple of layers to emphasize the color and to emphasize the stiffness. Like 1 layer of organza is still pretty limp. So I want a couple of layers in there, okay? And so that flounce, just different from a ruffle, if you want to get technical, would go in there. I got so into this project. I loved it so much. This was a coat that kind of went with the whole theme, which is exactly the same as before, except I decided to change it to below the knee later on. It's got the kintsugi crack in the gold. It would be done the same way where you take a coat and you draft the block shape of this. And, this is such a nice, classic style that you could develop this coat pattern and do a million variations, okay? I mean, kind of depending on if it sells, like if you decide and you learn through shopping experiences that your customer gravitates towards this coat shape, you could do this coat shape in a million different ways. We talk a lot about, skirt blocks, bodice blocks as like the fitting base for things, but do keep in mind that you can create like style blocks where, let's say you have a style that your customer adores and they'll buy it in, they'll buy it in a brown leather, they'll buy it in a pink wool, they'll buy it in a black wool, they'll buy, they'll buy variations because the coat, the proportions, the fit, everything, the quality is so great. And you could keep, reissuing this coat. And then you can add things to it like embellishments, different beading, different embroideries, different patches, crazy linings. You can make it a little bit longer, make it a little bit shorter as like trends change over time, those kinds of things. And something like this, you could take the same block and then again, use the twill tape to mark things off. When you're in the beginning stages of development, like let's say you're like seriously just working on raw muslin and you develop a coat like this, twill tape is really a good way to mark off your pockets, okay? Because let me tell you, I am someone who loves just some great outerwear and I will splurge if it's a great piece. But if I put this coat on and the pockets are not where I want them to be, if I feel awkward putting my hands in my pockets, if I have to stretch too far back because you have on-seam pockets on a coat, no. If you have weirdly angled patch pockets, no. If you have patch pockets that are so shallow that everything is going to fall out, no. Like I'm so particular about those things. Something you can do when you're drafting something like this is to take your twill tape, mark out the pockets and have whatever fit model pretend to put their hands in their pockets and tell them, does that feel like a natural movement of your body to put your hands in your pockets? There's this whole thing where product development is more strict when it comes to menswear because men are more picky, men don't want to shop as often, all these things. And that is true. Pink tax, let me know if you want me to make a video on pink tax, but a lot of that is, catering to shopping patterns of men versus women. And so, but with women, they're like, oh, they'll buy inconvenient things just for the look of it, blah, blah, blah. So they don't put as much effort. Don't do that. Does that feel like I'm yelling at you? I am. Okay, don't do that. Okay. So make the effort. Anyway, so these 2 things, I'm thinking about them in terms of the same body. Okay. Because again, once you nail a good body, that sounded wrong. You know what I mean. Once you nail a body, you can use it over and over again. That sounds worse, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So develop beautiful basic shapes that work for your customer, that work for your brand, and figure out whether they work for the fabrics that you're working with every season, all those things. Something like this, you could do it in leather, you could do it in these, where am I? I pulled these woolens. Look at this beautiful, soft yellow, and this fuchsia. I have a cousin who says fuchsia just for fun. And then this one, it has the gold kintsugi crack that comes across. Since it's only really meeting in one spot, you can really match it up. It's really a matter of matching up your notches and then, making sure you're getting the right placement. And then something like this where this is coming across, these are all embroidered with flowers. I have another panel in here that's all beaded. So this is more like a very flashy going out coat. I would own both of these. I love me some loud outerwear. Wearable drama, remember? Who watched that video where I have proclaimed that my personal style is wearable drama? This coat shape, very wearable, very easy to wear, nothing fussy about it, nothing weird hanging off that I have to take care of and make sure it doesn't fall in the toilet, blah, blah, blah. But the drama of patent leather gold and embroideries and yes, okay? So that's how I would approach those. Make sure they have beautiful linings. The pockets are in a good position. They got some inside pockets. The neckline is nice and fused with a solid interfacing so that it doesn't lose its shape ever. Keeps that neckline nice and clean and tight. Okay. So this is a very loose but fairly close to the body shift dress. And again, these seams are split. This is a pre-pleated tulle. It's gathered super, super tiny. You just take it and you gather it super crazy. You can buy them, pre-scrunched. Honestly, now that I think about it, instead of tulle, I think I would have used the organza. Well, this is the tulle I found in that glacier blue color that I loved for this collection. And then this is the organza. Here's a single ply of that organza. This one is polyester. This one is silk. But I think that the organza would have held the pleat better. And this one is a poly organza. It's very hard for silk to hold the pleat forever. It can be done. Okay, historians and costume people, and they argue about this all the time, but it is easier. So it's going to be one of the few times that I give a pass on the usage of polyester if you want the pleats to last forever. So you would take panels of this fabric to the pleater to get the pleating done, and then cut out the pattern pieces out of the already pleated organza. This is a black lace, this one. I loved it so much. But I would put a panel underneath it because, this is showing off your bits, and maybe you don't want to show everyone what's going on at home, okay? And so maybe you have a black habitai lining, okay? I don't like lining silk with polyester. What is the point of that? You're losing all the best qualities, the breathability, the ease of wear, the softness, all of that when you line a silk garment with polyester. Go watch my linings video. I do a whole thing about linings. So I would do a silk habitai lining, and then I would put that lace panel right on there. And then I would take this pleated organza panel and applique it on top of or underline it. Again, if you don't know what that means, that lining video is going to help you. And put it right on top of a layer of habitai or another layer of organza so that the stress of the sewing and the garment and the wearing is on the backing and not on the delicately pleated parts, okay? These seams, they're very narrow ruffles. It's a little bit like this flounce, except the difference, see, if you want a lot of ruffle, okay, if you want a lot of ruffle, you have this tiny measurement that gets sewn into here versus a very big measurement out here. And because you're trying to get all of this into this small amount of space, you get a lot of ruffle. If you want less ruffle, what you do is you have the lengths be less different. And so because this length and this length are more similar to each other, it's still gonna ripple, but not ripple so much. And you might be wondering, well, Zoe, what if I want a really narrow flounce, but I want it to ripple a lot? Great question, okay? You can make a lot of these and just sew them next to each other. So narrow, less ruffly, ripples going on along these same lines. And this panel is just beaded, and this panel is the black crepe. Just a little bit pebbly surface, a little bit matte, because there's so much attention happening here with all the textures. I didn't want another super shiny something down here. Something subtle like this down here. So again, this panel, the lace by itself, this underlined with organza. This is a beaded fabric. And then the whole thing would be lined with habitite. Okay. I don't like anything that's like too rough to not be lined. So I wouldn't want to feel this lace against my skin the whole night. And then the back of beaded materials with all that stitching, not attractive. So I would want a habitite lining for the whole dress, And it could be loose, just tacked up here at the armholes and the neck, and then sit loose inside and, end about a couple inches up. This one, I really am like torn. I kind of want to do a series where I make this dress in real life because I kind of miss making an evening gown. Here's the thing, okay, is this, I wanted to do a ball gown that didn't have a corseted top. It seems like that's pretty rare, like all ball gowns, they have a very structured corseted top. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it has to hold the weight of all the skirts. Okay. It's really hard to, it's just easiest that way, where you have a multi-layered, very structured, boned, lined, laced corset top. Even if all that structure is underneath and hidden and there's no indication of it on the outside. And then that really, your waist and everything carries the weight of all these skirts. But I wanted a ball gown where it didn't look corseted at top. If you can see, the top is kind of blouson-y and it just falls. And then the hips get the heavy beading, the ruffles that stick up, the gathers in here like that, and they carry the weight of the peignets. I already know how to make the peignets because this was an exercise I did with my Patreon class where I was draping things on the dress form as a way of playing around and then using the drapes from the dress form and photoshopping them onto templates and playing around with how they can be used in different ways. So I already know how to make this part. It's a big flounce. They're flounces made out of, the printing is bluer, but it's this tulle. This is just muslin. And they're different lengths of flounces. This is many layers of organza. And then of tulle, And then I wanted the peignets in many layers of the gathered organza, this pink organza. And that was the color story I had with the pinks and the, this baby pink and the golds and the baby blues and, that was the color story. Wouldn't have like a big hump in the back, like a Bella Pope dress. Here's the boat neck, and it would fall, and it would fit the hips. It would have this sort of action, and the ruffles coming up from the beaded section. And then this whole thing is straight. And then we have this flounce and this flounce. And then this. And I didn't want like a big butt hump, like a lot of, listen, anyone who's worked in fashion design and development for a long time will know that you inadvertently make a lot of weird body jokes, like constantly by talking about this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I want the flounce to come out and the panniers to fall, but I don't want the big hump in the back. I kind of want it to look like a modern robe de style, but this would be heavy, and structured at the hips. And because there's so much skirt, like most robe de style from the 90s, they cut off right at the ankle or mid-calf, somewhere around there. So it's a lot of fluffy skirts, but they have a definite weight and length. So you don't need a lot of understructure. But if I wanted to make this gigantic gown the way as gigantic as I want it, and if anyone knows my old work, I love a gigantic gown. Okay, I like it. I would actually want to make this into a skirt where, let's see, if it's like this and we have these pieces, I might actually do like a seam like that. And here's like the base skirt like this. Because, all this fabric, this gold charmeuse goes all the way down here. And these are add-ons. And so this is a skirt that I would make in the gold charmeuse. And underneath this top, I would have like a corselet type understructure and I know, and like, that's not easy to wear. That's like corseleted and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't have to be like super tight to cinch her in any sort of way. And it's not on display. And so this would be underneath to hold the weight of all the skirts, because everything else is going to be hung on this. And then this would sit on top. So I would actually have like a real subtle seam line right there that would be hidden by all the things that are happening. But this would be inside. Kind of give it like a support right at the waist. And again, because this is tulle and organza and whatnot, it's not going to be really heavy. It's not like wooden hoop skirts or, big leather ball gown, which honestly, if you get the right leather, it's not even that heavy. Ask me how I know. So yeah, that's how I would do this one. Okay, so that's it for today's sketches. But again, if you want me to dissect the construction of a particular garment that you've seen on the runway in an editorial, send me a clear, high-res, something I can really see the garment, photograph to teaching@zoehong.com, and it may be featured in a future video. Give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, all those ways you show me love, and I will see you in the next video.